All right. Good morning, evening, afternoon, guys. Welcome to the Versus Live, where every single Tuesday at this time we talk all things poetry. I am one of your hosts. My name is Jeff.
I am two of your hosts. My name is Matthias.
And today we are super excited to talk about one of the things we're really interested in is not just poetry and like developing your poetry, but also developing your kind of like business acumen with poetry, trying to make a living out of your work. Yeah, get that.
Right.
And so you may be interested in maybe even getting a teaching position or, working in academia in some degree. Or maybe you may also just want to like apply for like some prizes. Like, I don't know, like maybe like a Ruth, Lilly, and Dorothy Sargent, some of these things that are out there that get you paid. And we have brought in a great guest who is going to help you learn more about how exactly this happens. This is Willie. What's up, man?
What's going on? What's going on?
Thank you so much for being with us. It's great to have you.
Great to be here. Great to be here.
So first of all, let's congratulate you on that, Ruth Lilly. Speaking of that, congratulations.
Thank
Can you tell us? We were actually talking with Ariana not too long ago.
Okay.
So can you tell us a little bit? How did you find out? What was that phone call like, and things like that?
Oh, okay. I wish this were a happier story. It was not.
Oh my
God. We're going straight to the sad.
I was not prepared for that, but okay.
I found out about 2 days before my grandmother passed that I had one, and it was really weird because I was on my way to the nursing home, and I got this call. And I'm like, who the hell is this from a random number that I could not know? And I'm like, I hope this isn't more book people. I'm tired of like answering emails. I don't want to do any of this. And then it is Chris Kazantis from Poetry Foundation saying, hello, this is Willie. I'm like, this is he. What's going on? We just want to congratulate you. I'm from Poetry Foundation. We just want to congratulate you on like winning the 2023 like Ruth, Lilly, and Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Poetry Fellowship. I'm like, in my head, I'm like, what in the world? Presently and like forward thinking, I'm like, I don't have time to process this right now. Thank you so much for this kindness. I have no real questions. I'm in shock. Then about like 2 hours later, I'm like screaming around the house.
That's what Ariana was saying as well. I'm sorry about the circumstances from that. It's a blessing. It's typical. It's tough.
It's tough. I think I've been telling some of my a few of my friends have been asking like, what the hell did you do? You didn't say anything. I'm like, I felt like I was on a personal NDA, not telling myself anything of like, this happened. I'm not acknowledging it till I can breathe and like actually like sit with it for a minute. The other parts, I think, I don't know, it's been unfortunately convenient.
Tell me more about this.
Like, one of my favorite people in the world technically left, and in the same space of that, like, I have enough to possibly consider like helping with her funeral arrangements. I have possibly enough to like reconsider like not having to get a second and or third job. Formally, I have options now, and I think the acquisition of like that type of opportunity, like on the fly, it's kind of like winning the lottery. You don't really plan for it, and so like in the same regards, it's like, okay, I'm going to take a breath, take a beat, and see what happens. So I've been rolling with the punches thus far.
Yeah, and I feel like, I mean, when we were I think a lot of times like really good news or like really great circumstances kind of clash with like real life like that. So like
Yeah.
did it feel like the space of the prize and the space of like this accomplishment was kind of like this outside thing that was happening, like just like hovering outside of like maybe like all the real life stuff that was happening?
In part, I think like mentally I was like preparing for like book tour stuff or trying to gather book tour stuff, trying to mentally think about like um arrangements, whether or not I'm going to sing at my grandmother's funeral or not. And on the flip side of like thinking very much like Tashina Arnold via Everybody Hates Chris. Like, I don't need this. My man has 2 jobs. My man being like my bank account at the time.
Listen,
I'm like, I
this show
really
doesn't
don't
get
need
talked about
this.
enough, by the way.
Yeah. Um, it's been affirming, humbling, but like affirming in a really, really like kind of ironic and funny way.
No. How do you just kind of like talking about the process for the Ruth Lilly? Like if no one's done it before,
Yeah.
what's kind of the general steps to it? What's the process? What are some suggestions you would give and things like that?
Ooh, okay. Read widely. Read widely, read widely, read widely. And this is to say like read things that are curious to you, read things that are foreign to you, read things that are like I've always wondered that, but like what happens for poetry, or at least like capital P big poetry, it's tough. I think we've sat through like, or maybe not sat, but maybe worked or labored or collaborated through an era or a decade of lots of beautiful bits of diversity, lots of beautiful conversations that are now starting to enter larger publishing. But it's tough to figure out what to read. Uh, Start with what you like, move from there, figure out the mechanics of it, and attempt to write something. I think for me, I didn't know anything really about big publishing before. Um, Honestly, ever, to be entirely honest, until like my book kind of happened. I self-published my chapbook like about a year after I graduated college. I pushed it like a mixtape. um, I popped my trunk. I sold my products. I had BH Poetry Slam like with a couple rolling. And as I wanted to get better, I kept listening to folks via Twitter and Instagram and whatnot, trying to figure out like who are y'all reading? Who's hot? Who's making things feel like I want to try that in a poem or try that in something else? I heard like some beautiful folks. Uh, I got acquainted with like the work of Somaj Sharif. I got acquainted with the work of like Justin Phillip Reed and some other folks that really made me feel like, can I try this? Can I do this? If they're saying things like this and this sounds like an accent like mine, and I too can write in ways where I'm trying to write like this, is it possible for me? I'm really weird about competition. I am quietly competitive, but I never say that out loud because I don't really have enough energy to commit to it. um, so I kind of do things seasonally. I'll write a bunch of pieces throughout the year. I'm generally always writing, even if I'm not like trying to, which is the same usually thinking. um, Write my poems, figure them out, try to get them out. The first time I applied to the Ruth Lilly, I didn't know what the hell was going on. I followed the requirements. They said 10 pages. They said you get like 100 words for an artist statement. What do I know about an artist statement? Nothing. What can I tell you about my poems? They're country. There might be a snake in it. There's probably a bird. And I think as years kind of went on and I like started hearing more people talk about like the possibilities of it, like the circumstances and the requirements kind of shifted. Like it went from being like 150 or 200 page or 200 word artist statement to like a full page, possibly about your poetics and like things. Most recently, it's a transition from a grant or transitioned towards a grant system. And I think I applied on the very last day. I think I almost did not get my application completed in time. And I think I riffed on my answers to parts of the application because I had been answering things like that for like a couple of years at this point. And I gave completely new work that nobody had written or had read, nothing that felt like anybody of my friends had really seen. Um, and I was like, I turned 31 this year. This is like my next to last year to kind of give it a go. Let's see what happens. Do our best, leave the rest. Word to Jennifer Lewis. And lo and behold, a phone call about 3 months later.
That's so interesting that you kind of broke so many of the conventions in terms of the length, in terms of I'm going to apply the last day, in terms of
new work.
I'm going to send this like fresh work. I love that's so cool.
It is scary too. I think after like 2 or 3 years of applying, because I applied every year I was in grad school, in the year after that, I think I sat with the fact of like, what is it that I want to say, and who possibly could know me for these things, and like, in what capacity does Poetry Foundation already know me? I was a finalist in 2020, which was slightly controversial of a year for like both like public things for publishing in general, alongside the pandemic. And there was a large list of finalists that year. I think there were 22. 5 folks got selected for the fellowship, but it got me like a decent bit of attention from some poetry related people. They gave us, or Poetry Foundation invited us to send in poems for Poetry Magazine. I sent in, I want to say like about 5 or so, and they picked 2 of my better / favorite ones. And later that year, they got selected for the J. Howard and Barbara M.J. Wood Prize for 2021, which is also weird because it's like their biggest prize for the magazine per year, and it doesn't quite make sense. And I'm like, what is happening with my life? It's like I'm right at the moments of like this going right and this not necessarily going great, but stuff is working.
Do you feel like you changed at all, like through your applications, like as a writer, or just even as like a person that is writing the poems?
Oh yeah. Every now and then I think I'm hot a whole lot more than I used to. I think I like hesitate less about my ability to write poems and my ability to like attempt to articulate what I'm trying to get through in poetic language. I'm more ballsy. I definitely will like tell you exactly how I feel, but I will delay it. And I don't care about delaying it sometimes. I think I'm more experimental, but I'm also like a whole lot stricter of a poet and a person that plays with language now.
Yeah, I think one of the things that when I'm speaking with people that like submit like poems to either like journals, or if they're just like, so even the people that are slamming, like the more times that they're able to reach that level and kind of, because it's not necessarily changing something about you, it's just reminding you like, hey, like the things that what you're capable of. And I think it's always super cool to see people that you're genuinely watching them from afar and you're like, okay, bro, you're amazing. Like, and if you don't think that, like, just like, just wait until these other people start saying it. And like, now all your friends are like, yeah, you're a man. I was like, yeah, I knew that. I knew that now. Of course.
It helps to kind of have like a solid community of hype men, like especially when you aren't necessarily like the most forward facing confident, I guess.
Yeah.
I kind of want to switch gears a little bit to talking about work, jobs. So can you tell people what do you do? Like, what's your job?
What day is it? I am okay. Technically, I am an adjunct instructor of English. Currently critical reading composition and intro to creative writing. At the University of South Carolina. I graduated from there in 2015. I'm teaching as alumni faculty in my old scholars program through student support services, which we collectively know at the university and throughout South Carolina's TRIO services or TRIO programs. My specific academic department was the Opportunity Scholars Program, which was an initiative for first generation college students who technically qualify for a Pell Grant, which is to say for smart poor kids who had never been able to get to college. I teach there now English 101 for about, I want to say 48, maybe 50 students right now. And I also teach Intro to Creative Writing to about 20 students. And they keep me on my toes. But outside of that, and probably like around that, I am a graphic designer and a brand designer. It's kind of like my alter ego, which is weird because I've kind of been doing that for about the same amount of time that I've been writing poetry formally now. But I make logos and color palettes and brand patterns and marketing schemes and mock-ups and things for businesses and entrepreneurs and solopreneurs and media influencers and artists and stuff now. Bachelor's in graphic design, drawn all my life. It's been helpful. I think in part it's also kind of been one of the things that's kind of helped me move into poetry a little bit more seamlessly.
I feel like marketing and advertising comes up all the time. It seems to be, I know a lot of poets kind of shy away from it, but I mean, you look like the Ultimate Twins and things like that. Like it's a thing. Like people do advertise. Like, how do you think working in, branding and things like that kind of connects with poetry?
Ooh. For me, at least, I think like my love of type is almost always forefront in my poetry. Whether or not you really like pay attention to it or not, I'm generally always cognizant of how my poems are designed, how their lines break, where their hyphens and other sets of punctuation appear, just as a general typesetter and editor. I'd argue I'm a better editor than I am a poet, which is saying a lot of things. But to me, my basis for like line breaks and understanding for readings of my poems are based in like graphic design typesetting principles. Like the less amount of words in a line, the quicker you can read it. Like if you end a line on an action word or a verb, generally, it makes the person want to pull to the next line because it's interesting. General rules of like, try not to have too many rivers, try not to have too many widows and orphans. Like my poems generally look neat, and when I break rules, I intentionally break them, but I don't always like give evidence that I've broken things. Like I'm the type of person who will like open a line with an M dash.
How
Just 'cause
dare
I
no,
can.
just kidding.
Just because I can.
End the podcast now. Like, I thought you were different.
Disgusting. Oh my gosh. It's like I really appreciate that answer. How do you navigate the time?
Truthfully,
from
I don't think about it. I think it's all the same process for me generally. Usually I think like the rough drafting or like the first instance is to get all the language out as I can. Then sometimes the work will be lineated or typeset just to kind of see like what it's kind of given when it gets to something physical. Sometimes I write it by hand. Most of the time I'm trying to write it by hand now because it helps me not say things that I don't care to say with the amount of time that I have, and the amount of time that I have before my hand starts to feel the beginnings of what I feel like a carpal tunnels. um, but I think generally I'm always thinking about who's going to read this or how I'm going to read it. And what's the easiest way for me to like honor the energy of this poem based off of what its words are doing. So I would possibly do something like Jack and Jill ran up the hill, breaking it like Jack and Jill, hard tab or hard enter, ran up the hill as like a 3-line poem, possibly, as opposed to putting it in one line because you ain't gonna pay attention to it, possibly, if you see that it's 7 words in a single line.
Yeah, and you also mentioned that it's kind of all part of the same thing, and I think that's like one of the things that I personally as an artist struggle with, because I typically segment all the things that I'm working on. So can you
Mhm.
maybe expound a little bit more about that? Because I think one of the things that our audience, a lot of people in our audience would probably wonder is, how do you kind of bring all of your different talents and all the things that you do kind of together, and just like what Jeff was saying, like make time for it, but also kind of make space in your head for it.
I think generally I've been like hella creative most of my life and possibly a bit escapist. um, you kind of grow up in like at the poverty line or like impoverished, uh, which for country people, poor as hell. Thinking about what you would do if you had more opportunities and resources, whether you really want to or not. And so you're working, but that's not like necessarily like your where your imagination might be, where your desires might be. Kind of always been working on something, um, and I kind of keep my hands busy. I think it's kind of probably cathartic, maybe therapeutic, if you want to define it like that. And so sometimes, in order to kind of work out what's going on in my life or what's been going on globally, nationally, locally, um, that I feel like I possibly want to meditate on language with, I think about how I know it. There are poems that I know like
Mm,
music because they attempt to be musical or they like kind of emerge musically.
yeah.
Um, a lot of my poems are ekphrastic. They talk about visual art and describing things as other things because you can possibly reference one thing. You might not know a statue out of the Louvre, but you might know a Mariah Carey song that makes you feel like a statue or feel like something regal. You might not necessarily know like all the words to that like random hymn that's appearing in like maybe this poem's like epigraph, but you might know at least a couple of church songs that make you feel like, oh, I can rock to this, or I can kind of see where this might be. For me, when I say I guess it comes from the same place, I think of it as like all the things that I know how to do. I don't necessarily think about do I know how to cut a watermelon when I want to like slice a watermelon as much as it is like it's a part of the process. And what else informs like my cutting of this thing? What can I cut like a watermelon if I'm not necessarily sturdy in like my cutting of it? Um, what can I practice that like is comparable?
Mm,
Discipline wise is kind of like I don't necessarily have to write every day because I'm thinking and imagining every day. So for me at least, it's like giving myself enough time to like to be silly, goofy, imaginative, creative, maybe 15 minutes a day, maybe an hour. I take my mornings, cup of tea, which is fairly new again in my life. Uh, sit with whatever I'm thinking about, draw, doodle, give myself a space to kind of release it. And if it feels like it starts to be something, then perhaps coaxing it towards something that's a little bit bigger. Maybe a poem, maybe a portrait, maybe a song, something of the sort. Most of the things that I'm thinking about kind of blend into the rest of my life. If
yeah.
grief appears financially, it's also appearing spiritually or emotionally. If anger is like appearing physically in your life, it's probably going to weigh on you mentally. And so in that case, it kind of infiltrates all the other creative processes. Like when I'm mad, sometimes there's a poem about like pepper. Sometimes there's a poem about glass breaking.
Yeah, I think what you just said really hit me when you said like I might not write every day, but I'm thinking and imagining every day, because that's another kind of fault line for a lot of creatives is that they're thinking about production in a very linear way. They're thinking production means that I've written the poem today, like and maybe there's like some areas in your life that's what it means maybe, but I think a lot more people would be really benefited with that thought process of, yeah, some of these days that you are thinking about production, the thing that you should be thinking of is, are you taking that time to really rethink, like imagine, just really kind of be free artistically, and in that way, when the time comes and when it's been properly distilled, you can actually focus that energy into something tangible like a poem or a poetry like you were talking about. So I really appreciated that.
Definitely so. I also think it might be helpful to not think about production as having made something as opposed to like labored towards possibly making something. Like I remember some years ago, I got the opportunity to interview Alicia Nicole Harris for me and my co-creators slightly now defunct publication for the Scribes. And she said, every day you write is not writing. Sometimes it's just practice. Sometimes it's just an exercise. But every word that you put towards a project is a word that you didn't have before. Like, if I had to think about a book being made of poetry, I would have no book. But if I had to think about a book being made of poems and possibly making a poem, if it takes an hour, if it takes a day, if it takes a week, or it takes like 5 years, that poems process is going to take however long it is. I cannot time it. It makes no sense to try to put efforts on it like that, to me at least. So I think if anything, for me, and I don't necessarily know for other folks, I think sometimes it gets to be helpful to not think about poetry as a process of completion as much as it's a process of discovery, and allowing yourself to make tiny discoveries consistently until you find revelation.
That's a word. Tiny discovery. That's I'm gonna take that with me. That's good.
So we've talked a little bit about just expectations from work, or even shifting our own expectations of our own work. I want to take this for our people that again are considering like an academia type route. How long have you been teaching for now?
This is my second year.
Okay.
This is my second year.
Walk us through the fire. So tell us about the hiring process. Tell us about your first year. Tell about new things you're learning this year. That would all be super, super helpful.
Okay. Graduated 2021. I moved back home to be closer to family and kind of get my bearings again. I felt like I was like really, really tired after graduate school. The summer of 2022, I've been freelancing a bit for a couple of months, and I really just needed some extra cash, and I didn't want to be frivolous about how I did it. I didn't want to like do so many like design projects that I felt like my mind was like falling apart, and I think I had gotten to a place of like burnout. And so I've been looking for jobs, and one of my former English instructors emailed me and said that there were openings for the first year English program at the University of South Carolina, and they asked if they knew anyone to forward the email to them. She forwards me the email. I see it. I'm like, okay. I quickly gather my resume or CV and some references that feel recent, and I send over the director my cover letter and all that. I don't think about it too hard, and I kind of just let it go. It was like a Friday afternoon. That next like Monday, like top of the morning, like, oh my God, I've seen your, like, hi, my name is such and such from this department. He no longer like works there. Uh, and he's like, I've seen your CV. It looks like you've done a lot. It looks like you've also been publishing a lot. Why are you like interested in teaching? We would be really lucky to have you, but why are you interested in teaching? And I'm like, because I need a job. And like very simply,
Good answer.
because I need a
Oh,
job.
I want to help it. Not that you don't, but
Like
They're not gonna watch this.
I did want to help, and I do love like teaching. It is a tough thing. I think over this semester, or at least my first semester, I'm like, I have taught in like weird capacities before. And I would say weird because it's been a long time. I was a math tutor for like my last 3 years of high school. In college, I was they called it a supplemental instruction leader. But essentially it's kind of like a tutor with like some special privileges for business calculus. And so between that, I was also like teaching music as director of like my gospel choir at college. I was attempting to do some other things. It's been a lot of like community teaching, formally teaching English to children, or to young adults that are like closer to my brothers and younger cousins' ages and whatnot. It felt like, I'm like, wow, am I that old? Is this what we looked like when we were doing this? Did I know none of this when I got here? Like, you go in with all of like these expectations, then like you talk to your students, they're like, hi, we're just here for syllabus day. Do we need to actually buy this book? Like, is this writing going to be difficult? And it's like, no, no, no. Perhaps you need to spend that money on that book if you're not going to read it. And that's only for me being a bit petty currently, because it's like, why are you literally asking me if you're going to buy a book if you're not going to read this, baby? This makes no sense to us. Just to say, I've gotten really, really familiar with the university system again, and I was not mentally prepared to be back amongst that so quickly. But I think mostly it was just the shock of being on somebody's campus so soon again. Yeah, it's been beautiful, but it's been definitely like making me feel like I'm like in a, I don't know, a sitcom version of my life. I started watching Abbott Elementary about like a month before I got the opportunity to like send in anything for this gig, and I'm like, you know what, I might want to be a teacher. That seems like it might be, impactful. 2 months later, I just wish I could get 5 minutes to finish this lesson plan without people emailing me.
It's like in a different world when they came back, and then like all the original students down there, now they're all teachers at the school. I'm like, what are the odds? Because like I don't see the other class students all teachers at this school. Like, what happened there?
It's definitely something.
I just got done rewatching A Different World with Oz today, so now I'm like, remember that time?
No, it's real. Like, I think about that last season of Whitley teaching that English class, and Heike, I felt like her like my first couple weeks in class. I'm like, do I know what I'm doing? I think I know a little bit. Do I know enough to tell you how to do something?
Maybe. I mean, we'll find out together.
Jury's still out. We'll see.
So like if someone has never adjuncted before,
Yep.
obviously adjuncting has a reputation.
Yes.
Walk us through the lifestyle, the good, the bad, the painful.
If you have ever felt any type of way bad about public school teachers and the amount of work that they have, I cannot say it's comparable completely, but it can give you an inkling to like what an adjunct might have to deal with. People think because you are an instructor that it's like, I won't say it's glamorous, because in part to the right person it can be very much so, appears much. um it gets tough. It gets tough to think about the possibilities of like what you're going to like share with your students to possibly like teach them things that could be really useful. um you have to be careful about how much you think you can actually teach in real time. Like, my classes generally are like 50 to 70 minutes. That's not a lot of time, regardless of how much it sounds like a lot of time. We only do maybe 2 or 3 poems in my creative writing workshop right now. We're in the poetry unit. And it's mostly because we have to have time to think and talk and closely read and converse, analyze, synthesize, all those other things. But for the average adjunct, I do know most of us do not have, do not really even have a general office. Or at least I don't know many folks in my department who have an office that is not shared with at least 3 other folks that might be graduate students or other adjuncts. We are essentially like freelance teachers, or to put it more immediately, like free agent professors. Like, I'm only partially signed here. Like, if I were to take my like talents elsewhere, I would technically do that, but it's kind of like that. You're like a free agent teacher. There's nobody that says like, hey, you kind of got to be here like indefinitely. You sign up for the amount of hours that you feel like you can teach. Some people try to get more experience to kind of help build their resumes and get other opportunities. A lot of intro classes are usually taught by adjuncts or graduate students.
Right.
University systems can get to be difficult when discussing things like pay, especially for, I guess, for writers specifically, like for the M.F.A. Some people do not necessarily consider that a terminal degree, even though classically, for whatever that word means, it is considered as such. Which in some cases means you could technically get paid as much as like someone with a doctorate. In other cases, you can only get paid as much as a master's. It just depends on the circumstances, and you got to be very clear about what you will and won't take. Many adjuncts are teaching minimum 2 to maybe 4 classes. That's a lot of classes. If it's different days, that's the same content for different time schedules, which is a different class. I know some folks that taught Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, and then just Wednesday. Same class, 3 different ways is 3 different classes. If you think that you're having a difficult time keeping up with your instructor that is an adjunct, chances are they're probably having the same issue that you're having, but without a proper desk to cry at. That's like in their actual department. Like, it's that type of thing.
It's like, oh my gosh.
We're like some of the adjuncts I know are some of like the smartest, most brilliant folks around, but it's tough. It is tough.
And I think, what are your projections for like tenure and things like that? I mean,
I have not really thought about that far yet, and I think in part I'm still
maybe that's
trying to
good.
figure. I think in part, I think in part I'm still trying to get like my feel for how long I feel like I can do it throughout the day, and like if I want to still do it specifically with English through like the critical reading composition or writing comp, or if I want to like lean more into creative writing. I think I like creative writing a little bit more, but it's kind of tough to teach that without options, access, honestly, student popularity, and honestly just funding often. But I don't know, it's the weirdest thing. I feel like I relate to like the entire cast of Abbott Elementary in the oddest of ways. if there ever is a spinoff about the community college that like is up the street from that elementary school, I want to be on it.
Have you ever seen Community?
I have. Yeah.
This can really quickly turn into a community podcast. But just to be, we're here. We're
Yeah. It's weird. I think it's a beautiful opportunity. It can be jarring. It can be jarring. Like, if you think about the last time that you were a student, how did you treat the person that was teaching you? Then think about
why you got to be like that. Why you got to be like that?
Because like I realized that like even doing well in school, I was not necessarily the best type of student. And like recognizing the type of student that I was by teaching students that are like similar to me, I'm like, oh, I was giving my teachers hell quietly. Did not know it. Like, oh, Willie, are you okay? Yeah, I'm reading ahead. Like, why are you reading ahead? Because girl, I finished this 3 weeks ago. You're like, have you finished this project? Yeah, here it is. I could not produce a draft beforehand, but here we are with the final draft now. Like, my own personal brand of chaos as a young academic and whatnot. I say every now and then gets like handed back to me a little bit. It's a reap what you sow situation a little bit. You know, you see everything, it humbles you. You keep it pushing.
Having been a director of teachers too, it works that way as well. Like it's like from the student to teacher. When you're a teacher, you understand what students do. But then when you're a manager of teachers, it's the same exact. Teachers are no different than students. It's like, oh my God, it's the same. It just cycles through.
It's like you think of all the things that you've like possibly made a teacher mad at, and it's like, yeah, I probably deserve to be yelled at. And then I probably deserve that like that stern look.
Maybe I shouldn't have done that. They probably didn't like that when I did that.
Do you have any one instance in your scholastic career that you're like, man, I really wish I could have took that back?
Ooh, a few, but like nothing big. They're like some just petty things, I think, like more than anything. I think I wish I had like joined a choral program younger when I was in like middle school, just for like the experience and to like be able to learn music formally, which is weird to be like a musician now and be able to keep up, but still like have a curiosity of like greater bits of theory. From the regret space, I regret literally not. I regret not sleeping more, if I tell the truth.
Yesterday or like in life or like
Yeah, you know, I think like at a certain point, like in your late 20s, early 30s, you kind of reach a point where tiredness just doesn't go away. And so you're just kind of like, I'm less tired today, but I'm still a little tired. Like, could I take a nap? Yeah, I could take a nap.
Yeah. Oh, once you have kids, it's
listen. When I think it was like as soon as I hit like 26, 27, like that's when naps went from being like man, I gotta take a nap, but I get to take a nap. Let's
all of the enthusiasm, like, oh my God, nap time.
I have a special pillow just for like this is not my sleep pillow. This is my nap pillow. Okay, this is and it's a higher functioning pillow because this is the one if I need to get to sleep quickly, like this is the one that's gonna get there.
Okay, now is this going? Is this the Egyptian cotton pillow? Or is this like the bamboo pillow?
Nah, so this is so it transitioned from there was like a memory foam pillow, right?
Okay.
And but it was like this really special memory foam. Like I got it on a sale. I got it like 20% off.
That's
and
a good sale.
Listen, okay, but here's the thing. So I'm gonna go into the story. Why not? Before me and Ajane like dated, like I never had pillows at my house because like first of all, like I grew up in the hood. Okay, so like we didn't have pillows. We would take a cover and we would just roll and that's the pillow. And here's the thing, and she might be watching. She's not watching, but if she sees this at some other, she'll know it's. And so literally, I remember being like like I gotta get pillows now. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I can't just be, you know, having like just like these no pillows. And so I go to Big Lots. Do you have Big Lots out there?
Yeah. We just got
Okay,
a brand new one a couple years ago.
Okay, so I go to Big Lots, and I'm in Big Lots, and they have these pillows, and they're these memory foam pillows, but then they have this suede kind of case, and
Okay.
I can't even describe, because it's a wild feeling, like putting your head on a pillow for the first time, and like I've put my head on pillows before. Okay, so I don't want you to think that I just never seen a pillow in my life.
We ain't judging.
I just never owned the pillow. You know what I'm saying? It was just never
Hey,
my
it's
pillow.
real.
You know what I'm saying? And the thing is, I didn't even think about it. Like, when I was a kid, I just never had a pillow. So like when I grew up and I had my own place, I just never thought, like, man, like, you know what would be go good with this bedding set? Like a pillow. So it was just so funny, because as like that was the best sleep I had ever got in my entire life. Like, this is what the people be
I know
on.
that's right.
Okay.
I know that's right.
Let me tell you something. It's a different way. Well, I was about to say a different world, but yeah, it's a whole different world when you get that special. It's just the memory foam, and there's like the little 2-layer memory foam, because it's like the little thicker memory foam, and
That's
then
a
the
good memory
little one
foam.
is a little bit softer. Oh yeah, I could go on for days, but yeah.
Look,
I love me a good nap.
I might need to like cop that brand of pillow, because quite frankly, like the nap between my classes might need to be like a little bit stronger. Can't lie.
Ooh,
someone is not satisfied.
Now, what's your napping posture? Are you able to like sleep like somewhere comfortable? Like, what's the?
I'm not entirely sure yet. I've been trying to figure out like how in the world I can like squeeze a nap in, because I have not been napping. And like I'd like to nap, because I have about a 4-hour gap between like my
That's a
Monday
perfect
and
amount.
Wednesday
Oh, that's
classes.
you would be a
Right.
different person after that nap.
Spoiled.
I
Oh,
can, you know, I can have a different personality and everything.
Exactly. What?
The only one to blame is you, Willie. No,
Clearly, this is a self-induced problem.
It don't even matter how your day was before, because after that nap, it's a different day. Like, I've
Look,
gotten this.
that's wild. I just wish I could nap, man. My body don't let me do that.
Mom won't let me.
It's just really sad.
So
It's
like,
very frustrating.
I feel like I'm always like stealing naps. I feel like I'm also like quietly referencing the song "Steal Away." Like, I'm not necessarily stealing away to Jesus, but like I am stealing away possibly to like Slumber Town.
Yeah, y'all different from me. I feel like if I sat here too still for too long of it, I'm gonna be asleep. Like, that's how naps. Like,
that's how my wife is. She's
but
super
I'm just
fortunate.
perpetually tired, I suppose. But maybe
it's a superpower some people have, and I just have not been graced with.
What if that was like I would watch that sitcom, like, of the superhero that's like, but his one superpower is just like, if he wants to sleep, he'll be asleep.
He's out.
I'm sure there's ways that make that useful.
I think so.
I'll start writing on that. We'll see that in production once the writer's strike is over. We'll see that.
We expect a bomb ass pilot, and honestly, like if it ain't submitted to Sundance or like an HBO set, like I'm going to be personally disappointed now. I'm invested.
It's gonna be a really touching.
We'll make our own network.
It's gonna start off like, oh, this guy can nap, but can he dream? And that's the trailer. But he's always known how to nap, but now he's learned how to dream, and it's gonna open up to like the sun going down, and then he's just going to sleep.
Like an episodic situation too, like you know, different adventures.
Like a limited series, because we can go like 6 episodes. We can really get into the character, and then we can get into like his friends and family who were like, when he was growing up, he never slept, and so we were all so worried about him. And then in this like tragic accident that left like maybe like one person that's like he's always asleep, but he's sometimes awake, and then it was his polar opposite, and like he used to be always awake, but now he's like, oh my gosh, I can nap again.
There's some prophetic things that are currently happening right there. Like, you have
we are trying to manifest in this space, man.
You have an entire character that is out here like going from one extreme to the other. I want to know what the level of trauma was. Did his grandmother like randomly get like robbed gunpoint for pickles? Did You
It
know,
was
a kindergartner like convince him like to buy some cookies and like it changed his life. What happened? I need to know the
yeah. Well,
backstory.
so okay. So here's something. Here's a little twist that we didn't know before. He had never met his father before, and then he met his father, and his father was a manufacturer for white noise machines. And
It's a
so
conspiracy theory.
now he's like, "Is that was my destiny all along?" And then
Not the static is literally causing him disruption, and so like now he is at like Lex Luthor level villain like arc, and now he got to
yeah,
like go destroy his own father. I'd watch that
yeah.
anthology
Now,
series too.
but then he's like, when he's like goes to confront his own father, he says, "Hey, Dad, I'm gonna put you to sleep," and then they fight.
I just need at least like two like wrestler like cameos. Get John Cena in there. He ain't even got to have a
Oh,
speaking role. Just let him
yeah,
walk past.
yeah.
And then like get the Undertaker minimum.
It has to be
Oh,
Undertaker.
yeah.
Undertaker has to be.
Oh, yeah. Man, I remember the day I found out that wrestling wasn't real.
Okay, when did you find out? Because when I found out wrestling wasn't real, I was not okay.
Okay, so it was this match with Booker T and who was it? It was Booker T and Carlito. And in the match, like, because Booker T has a scissors kick. And if you really think about the scissors kick, like that entire move, it's like clear this is fake. It's like, because you have to kick somebody, they have to lean forward, and then they have to stay there for Booker T to jump on the ropes and then come back and then scissors kick them. Like, even if you were kicked, it's like you would much quicker fall over than just hold your stomach down. So I remember I was watching, and I think Carlito had forgot he's supposed to be doing that, and so in the match he kicks him, and then Carlito like goes like lunges forward, but Carlito stands up for a second, looks around, and then he sees Booker T coming, so he leans back over and gets the scissors kick. And I'm like, is this fake? Oh my god! Oh my gosh! And when I tell you, and it was a Thursday night SmackDown too.
Ooh.
So it was like the day before like a school day, and so I went to school the next day like, hey guys, I got something to bring to you. Unfortunately,
it's the tone. It's the tone of disappointment. Like.
It was like, when did you find out? Like, when was your revelation?
I think I was about like 7 or 8, but it was like the most not funny but funny violent moment that I've ever seen. It was my grandma, rest her soul, and for all of like her personal controversies, was a fan at the time of Hulk Hogan. She did not like whoever. She explicitly did not like who this man was fighting at the time, or like wrestling at the time. So she picked Hulk Hogan because she was like, I don't feel like learning nobody else's name right now. And so it was one of those moments with where the announcer was literally watching, and I don't even remember who it was. I just remember him having on like this black Scully at the time, and I heard with a steel chair, and like literally a steel chair appeared out of nowhere. But like it was like one of them like Looney Tune like Acme bops, and I'm like, wow, I saw you like crumple a whole half second afterwards after he didn't hit you because this camera work is bad. I was a little nosy kid too, so like I was always like, is this real? Can we be sure that this is real? Who said this is real?
Like in that Attitude Era when it was like Triple H and Shawn Michaels and like all those, I feel like in my head, like some of their finishing moves like didn't make a lot of, like the Rock Bottom. You could wrap your head around that. I'm like, the Rock Bottom is like grabbing somebody. Is that I feel like the pedigree feels like if the move, what even the Tombstone Power Driver, I'm like, if the move is exactly what it looks like to the eye, then like you're killing this person. And I'm just like, wait a minute, because they have a match at WrestleMania next week. Like, how you murdered them, Undertaker? Like, why would you do that?
It's like the Undertaker performs seismic toss. Like it's giving Pokemon levels of violence. Like.
Yeah, man. Remember Jeff Hardy? Man, he would literally be on the he'd be on the steel cage, and he like does like a backflip onto the table that's like on top of a wrestling mat that's covered in thumbtacks. And I'm like, what's happening? What? And I used to really be like, man, like this is
Look, it was
horrible.
entertainment at the same time, because it's like, who thought of this, and why is nobody saying anything?
Yeah. But then it's like, I feel like it's like the Matrix. Like once you're out of the Matrix, then now all you see is the code. And so now, like, I'm watching wrestling, I'm just like, oh man, like clearly these guys aren't really punching. Because if you wanted to punch somebody, you'd punch them like this. You wouldn't hold their hand and like, why would you do that? Now, like, I could see it all, but it's still wildly entertaining. Like, but you have now I appreciate it for what it is. Like, I'm like, oh, it's supposed to be kind of this fake, kind of goofy thing, but these are characters that that somebody somewhere is writing, and they're writing these characters so that, you know, you get really into them, which is also, you know, something I can appreciate as a writer, as somebody who's like, yeah, I'm kind of on the outside of this fake thing, this fake dynamic, but it's not like a movie. It's not like a television show that, like, you know, that I would tip, but it is like these characters that they've planned out who's going to win this thing, the drama, the escalation. The best matches are ones where you're watching the characters of these people like through act, almost like Mission Impossible. Like in Mission Impossible, like Ethan Hunt, like the great thing about that series is that it's not just action. Like you're watching characterizations through action. And like that's what makes the action in that movie or those movies so good, because it's showing who he is, how he is under these specific situations and stuff like that. So I feel like wrestling is in a lot of ways, like I would like watch The Rock and I'm like, yeah, like The Rock is this like cocky, you know, guy who's very sure of himself, but then you got to see his vulnerability when he's like trying to defend like one of his like friends that are also like, you know, it's all right. It's all circles back.
That makes me want to ask a question, if I can ask a question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Wait, we have to turn on the question.
That's not how this
works.
Like the way you talk about The Rock makes him sound like a poet in regards to wrestling.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like because of that, I guess like out of whatever, I guess like your respective thing is, like who do you feel like is a poet in the thing that you're like currently most like interested in?
Who do I feel is like a poet in what I'm currently most interested
in? Like any field?
Yeah. Like I have been.
Oh, what a question.
Yeah. I've been thinking about it. Like also I've just been like hearing you talk about like the way that it's like choreographed and rehearsed, and I'm like, oh, this feels like a poem. Like, is a wrestling match a poem now?
Really,
there's stakes, there's character development.
So
there's
this is one of the things that I would, and this is, I mean, Vince McMahon has a lot of his issues and stuff like that, but there was this documentary, and they were talking about how Vince McMahon you would get like these stars that would come in, and they would have their gimmick, their thing, right? And typically for legacy wrestlers, they would have the legacy of whoever, like if they're like that. So The Rock was kind of already built to be like a star. He was kind of a chiseled, good-looking guy, who I think his characterization definitely grew over time. But he had that eyebrow, he had that look, so they were already like, we know that you can like kind of do this role. And I think it's not necessary. I mean, when it comes to wrestling, I think the best wrestling matches, the ones that you really remember, because like a real wrestling match can't really achieve this, not really, because you don't have the rising, like you typically, not going to say typically, a lot of times you'll have somebody that's fairly dominant that's going to be dominating the entire match, but then also you don't have the particular notes of like the rising and falling of action. You don't really have the poetic symmetry there a lot of times, because it's like, you know, who wins is kind of up in the air. But when you're talking about like a wrestling match, when you're talking about somebody who is like the heel, and then somebody who is like that's the baby face, that's the guy who's supposed to be the big guy, like John Cena. Like John Cena is it's a bit of a conundrum, because when I was a kid, I was like,
thing I think I've heard about John Cena ever.
Yeah, because it's like John Cena as a rapper, I remember thinking to myself, because he didn't start a rapper.
I forgot. that he did not start as a rapper.
He didn't start. He didn't. That was not his persona. And then he went like I don't even know. I can't remember what it was. Like he went away for like 3 weeks, and like he wasn't in any matches for like 3 weeks. And then he came back and he had the baggy shorts and he had the armband and he was rapping. And when I'm a child, I'm like, oh my God, is he better than Pac? He's better. This is
not you saying that he went to like Diddy's off-brand school for making the band for 3 weeks and came back with like bars and freestyle.
Like, when that song comes on, it is so crazy because he also did that thing. He did the transitions where he started doing movies, and it's so hilarious because none of his characterization from wrestling translates to his movies at all. Like his movies are all he's this Marine, this police officer, this all this other stuff. And then when he's because like The Rock has never played a character that's not The Rock. Like in all The Rock's movies, he is The Rock. Like you know what I mean? Like he's like this, but it's also like if you're like all muscle, like if you're like that huge, just like I can't. I don't know what you're gonna cast. Like what else you're gonna cast? Like I'm gonna like you can't be like a super like you can't be a lot of other roles because like you've kind of built yourself up to being like this one guy. Which is also that's also an interesting dynamic in of itself. But back to John Cena, because I legitimately as a kid was like top 5 rappers of all time. John Cena's up there.
I love that.
He's absolutely. Have you listened to that? Did you ever listen to the album?
Okay, so I listened to it once, and I will say I listened to it once because one of my friends had it because they were also like a really, really big wrestling fan. I was not being so much a wrestling fan because I don't know. It was like something like towards like me turning 10 years old, and I'm like, but there are more interesting things on BET or MTV, and I really need these things. Which is to just say I wanted to be a performer. But I think John Cena's like musical abilities and rapping abilities specifically are surprising. But like you don't feel out of place with it. It's just kind of like, why do you know how to do this, John Cena? But also like, I'm not bothered by you knowing how to do this.
Because listen, when you're a kid and you're listening to this happening, I think I don't think I wasn't informed on the other dynamics about him, this being a performance. And I was just like, man, this guy is like a real hip hop guy who's come. But then if you listen to it now, it sounds like an army sergeant, like yelling at you. But it's like rapping. Like I'm telling you, if you find some time, just listen to it again and just think to yourself, like, I really believed, like, because I too was like, this guy is basically Biggie. He's basically this guy is basically Tupac. Okay,
that's you say it like
but
masterpiece. But
that's
him for No Limit.
That's like I feel like the gladiator dynamic. It can introduce anything into like. I feel like it's like espionage almost. It's like it can introduce any character dynamic into like your space, and you're actually believing it because the upward threshold of this thing is like this guy is battling for, you know, whatever the cause is. And so he's like, man, he really had me like, he was like, you don't believe in my rhymes, you don't believe in the hood, you don't believe in it's like people would really be fighting him on the basis of get all that hip hop out of here. He was like, he'd be writing rhymes in the ring. I remember Vince McMahon came out there and he was yelling at John Cena. He was like, cut all that rap music off. He was like, you ain't never gonna stop my bars. I'm like, you're not gonna stop his bars. He's still committed.
He's too committed.
He's too committed. You ain't gonna stop him. You know where John Cena's from, and he's like, he's not from the hood at all. But it's just such an interesting, I think, dynamic. I think even as a writer, I think like, man, what is the easiest or the best? Like the reason why, even like superhero movies do so well because it's like. The only thing you have to do to really believe any other characterization is like understand that this person is like a physically, not even you don't even have to be physically capable, but you're physical quite often. So it's
Yeah.
like your dynamic enters into the physical arena and you are fighting with these other concepts in a physical way. And like that's the thing that wrestling does. Like wrestling brings it's like it's not this metaphorical, fighting against these things. It's like, no, this rapper from the hood is fighting Hulk Hogan. And Hulk Hogan doesn't like his rap music. And he's like, this isn't a metaphorical battle of ideas. This is a real John Cena is putting the hood on his back. And he's telling you. And I was really like, thank you, John Cena, for defending us, baby. You held us down. He over here saluting after every. I'm like, I don't know why you did that, but okay.
I low key need a thank you, John Cena t-shirt now.
It's really conflicting because it's like the only time you ever see it, and it's the same, bro. A couple weeks ago, The Rock came back to SmackDown, and when he came back, like John Cena came back, and like John Cena ain't never put on them shorts a day in his life until he came back to SmackDown. And then he's like wearing them super long shorts and the backwards cap. And for some reason, it just flipped the switch in my head. And I'm just like, I came back to the hood, baby. Hey, I ain't seen in a while, boy. How you doing?
I cannot because I understand. It's like it's like whenever you see like your favorite rapper like do the thing from like the early 2000s that like you love, like I ain't gonna lie, like I got to see Bun B in Houston like this past weekend, and like everything in my childhood like went completely bananas. I'm like, it's Bun B. Y'all can't take him. You can't do it. You can't stop him. Like knowing me, like being a nerd from the hood, and at the same time, just kind of like I ain't nobody's rapper. At the same time, I'm gonna have the same level of audacity.
Yeah, man, it's the attitude. It don't even matter if you're a rapper or not. Like it's well, I mean, quiet as it's kept. A lot of these rappers ain't rappers, but that's not even. We don't even gotta get into that. But it's just that attitude, that bravado, man. Yeah.
I mean, I be trying not to air myself out as an imaginary rapper on the page because half of my poems be feeling like that. But that's also just to say, like, Awkward Black Girl or The Misadventures of Awkward Black Girl by Issa Rae has very much had a very prominent hold on my subconscious since I first seen it.
Yeah, that's real, man. Man, that was a good series too.
Mm-hmm.
Dang. Oh wait. So wait. Are you a big bun? Who had the best verse on International Players Anthem?
Asking the real questions out here.
Okay, so like I am forever like a child of Three Stacks. At any given point, like that man is one of my poetic influences at this point. However,
okay, we like the however.
And I need to make sure that I pull up this list of folks that's in this video, right? But and somebody correct me, because I'm having like teacher lag right now. Is Pimp C in this video?
Yep. Yeah.
Pimp C's verse is my favorite. And
really?
I say this because I have to almost always, and this is like both controversially and being like a queer fan of like poetry and a queer fan of rap. I personally identified as a pimp and a fairy. So like I was like, if you could change this one bar, like we would be
on the same. We didn't have to
like we didn't have to do it like this. But just to say, like beyond that line and like given like the timing and like the poor aging and part of it, I still think it's line clear, and it's mostly just because it's like it's audacious. It does a thing with rhyme that you were not expecting, but it's also like saying like contextually and trying to like at least think removing the top layers of like homophobia and like femophobia. It kind of asks you like, are you really about what you claim you would be about? Like, are you hustling the way you claim you hustling? Or are you literally just being like, oh, I can do whatever? Are you about this life? You claim you about this life?
Dang, you right.
Like, and I'm gonna tell you flat out, like, you
Yeah.
ain't about this life, and you ain't gonna say nothing.
Hey, that's kind of that's that. I'm gonna have to do another listen a little bit later on. That's so okay. So I really love Pimp C's part two. Here's the thing. Here's the thing that I think of that a lot. The thing about the song is that you have to understand is that Andre's part is it's like it's really transcendent. It's like the thing that Andre does, and but it's weird because it's also like the thing that Andre does with rhyme scheme is so awkward.
Yeah.
And it's like, but it's also like only Andre is gonna do that on a song. You know what I mean? Like the only
like I was listening
like
to his
having
verse
Andre on a song is like having another instrument that's happening. You know what I mean?
Like he is just as mythical as that flute of his is now, and it's
that's my dream. My dream
like,
is one day I'm gonna run into Andre and he's gonna be like, "Here's a flute for you."
I'm trying to like finish enough of like the main things in life so I can like find an Andre 3000 side quest, because let me tell you something, when I complete it, y'all ain't gonna believe it.
It's over. It's over. But then you can like follow like his like the little map that he left behind for his side quest, so you can do all the little stops that he went on.
That's
man,
it.
that man, that
I love his.
Stacks.
I love the way he works words and language. Like he'll be lewd, like he'll be explicit, and then he'll be like really, really clever all on like the same breath, and does not care about how many times he repeats about some things. I was listening to his verse on Killer Mike's Scientists and Engineers.
Yeah.
It's like him, Aaron Allen Kane, Killer Mike, and Future. And even though I do think Killer Mike's verse is probably like the best on that, like
you thought Killer Mike cleared him?
I'm going to say the following thing only because like
okay.
And I won't curse, but like look at me.
That we burnt out his village line.
Look at the crook of me. Like
yeah.
I'm like
okay, yeah.
I'm like, there is something about like that little bit of like challenge of like, hey, look at me again, look at me messing some shit up and telling you about it, look at me being in front of you and like attempting to like be subversive. Now whether I'm actually subversive is not the point. It's me telling you that I'm going to do so, and me being like linguistically and like phrase wise interesting. Like you didn't know what was going to happen in any of those verses.
That's or maybe Future. Like I could probably like I could probably predict the things that was happening in the future. But nah, that's a tough way to start an album too. That's tough. That was tough, man. I remember like when it came out, we were driving from Chicago. Actually, I was driving from Chicago back home, and I just remember thinking to myself, like, and again, I'm a long-standing Andre fan, and I thought too. I was like, when I first heard it, I stopped after Andre's verse, and I said, "Man, Andre really has the best verse in the song, man." That's I had to let me push play so I had to
put it down like a couple times. I'm like, it's too much. Like whenever you see that meme of like that dude holding like his earbuds and like they on fire because they smoking because it was too hot. Like that was me. I was like,
yeah, I can't even imagine being an artist being like, let me send this track to Andre and let me see what, because then what do you do on the track? But Killer Mike did that, to be clear. Killer Mike did that. I rock with Killer Mike's verse too. But man,
like he did that like Rent was due. Like somebody was outside his house with the repo man, like waiting for his new Camaro or something. I'm like, girl, what is happening here? Why are you rapping like this? Also, am I a new Killer Mike stan? Is this time?
Do
Am I too
I?
old to be a stan for
Do
new
I have to
people?
get it? I gotta get a tattoo now. Dang it.
I'm like, I gotta go get like a mold for like some fronts now or something, because like
Yeah.
I felt like for once I had been stuck or transported back to like the hip hop that I kind of grew up loving, like folks that were trying to be lyrically innovative, folks that were trying to be like musically like poignant on top of being clever, like
Yeah.
and I don't know, just bold. I think the boldness is kind of what I love about hip hop, and in part like some of the stuff that kind of translates from hip hop and rap to other culture. I think it also kind of generally applies to my poetry, but I tend to be a little bit audacious. So
Nah, that's when we talking about boldness, especially. I mean, I really love like have you tapped in with Run the Jewels? Have you tapped in with their?
yeah,
Okay, big
yeah,
but also when you're talking about Andre, his verse on Life of the Party,
yeah. Ooh,
like when we're talking about boldness, because like I ain't gonna say it on YouTube, but like there's that part in the song where in Andre's verse where I'm thinking like, why would you say that? But then I'm thinking like it's a level of transparency that I think a lot of artists don't even have the language to be able to express in a way that's actually artistic. You know what I mean? It's like they know how to. A lot of people know how to be vulnerable. They know how to put their vulnerability out there. But there's like, man, like the thing that he does in that out, because like I almost cried after his verse, and like he said some stuff in there that I'm like, hey man, why would you? But then I'm thinking to myself like, dang, like he's really just being honest, and like he kind of cutting it open with this, which is really beautiful. So yeah, man.
yeah.
We could talk for some days about Three Stacks.
Look, I honestly probably could have like a whole like conversation about him alone, like that, and like just like some of the things he did. Like I was listening to a theme song from Class of 3000 just yesterday.
Bro, Class of 3000. Are you still there? Or is it?
Give it a second. We are putting a call out to Willie. Oh no.
Are we coming back? But yeah, y'all. If y'all have never heard of it, Class of 3000. It ended way too soon, but it was like this little cartoon that starred Andre 3000, and it's
What was it called?
Class of 3000. It's man,
I never even heard of that.
it's a little bit of a deep cut. That's a little bit of a deep cut. Like, you know, it wasn't incredibly popular, clearly, but you know, it was really good.
Did it come out on like?
Not it was on TV. I know that for sure. But what channel? I was a kid, so I can't even remember like what exactly it was on. I just remember seeing it. But Class of 3000 was really good. But yeah, I just think that when we're talking about like writing, we're talking about like good writing. I don't think, and just what we were talking about even just now. I think good writing exists in really all the platforms that are really memorable and stick with you are in a lot of ways byproducts of somebody being able to orchestrate some good writing in there. Like even if it's not directly when it comes to you know, a script, but somebody's able to layer dynamics and characterization in a way that is appealing to watch and take in. And so yeah, whether it be in an Andre or Big Mike verse or in The Rock, the greatest. Good stuff. Are we coming back?
We trying?
Made it.
Willie.
Yeah.
We got you.
Yeah.
Oh, we did it.
Mercury retrograde is trying to take me out again.
Stack.
But yeah,
See what
class of
happens when you talk about
3000,
three
man.
stacks?
I was telling Jeff, I was like, this is a deep cut. Like, you know, that's not gonna be that ain't gonna be the one that everybody remembers. But man, what channel? Like, I know it wasn't like one of the kids things. It was something else.
It was Cartoon Network.
I remember it was Cartoon Network. It was
Cartoon
How
Network.
was I watching it? Because we didn't have no cable. How was I watched it.
You got some friends, man.
Yeah, it might be.
Possibly so. It was a wild time. Lots of things were happening, like, and at that point in the internet, like, wasn't it like, I don't know, it was like a lot of celebrities had like television shows at that time.
Yeah, there was a couple. But yeah, Andre Benjamin, man. His verse on Hello with Erykah Badu,
classic.
Oh my god.
Classic.
But again, it's just, I think it's a really good example of somebody who I think their brain works in a pattern that's like, it's non-conventional. It's like, I'm not thinking of writing a poem like that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not even thinking of using sound the way he uses sound. He uses sound as a rhyme scheme. like you're in this rhyme scheme, and the thing that rhymed with this is like the sound that he makes, but it's also like it's within the context of the work that is just brilliant.
So. I think so too. Like, I think if I pick up anything from him, it's like the audacity to try some things that I've never tried before. Like, can I repeat a phrase like 3 times and nobody notice it? Can I like progressively kind of like play up like a double entendre or draw out one?
Yeah.
And can I just be petty? Like, I think the most beautiful moments are like either when he's like blunt or just like being like a little like cheeky.
But yeah. Sure. Now, what might be, I don't want to say it's controversial, but, and I know he doesn't, what I would say, he doesn't write his rhymes, but he's a Wayne. Here's I'm gonna put this out there. Okay, I'm gonna say this, and I hope you know we're still friends. I love Andre 3000. I love Andre 3000. Like, I'll be clear. Yeah. I love Andre 3000. But pound for pound, Wayne is a better rapper. And here.
Okay, continue.
Here's what you gotta. Because here's the thing. Because Wayne has albums, right? You know what I'm saying? He has multiple bodies of work. And mixtape, which you can make the argument the mixtapes are more impactful. I don't even make that. I'm like, I think it's fairly clear that the mixtapes are more impactful than the albums. Well, I mean, maybe it's not. Maybe it's not as clear, but I think it's fairly clear that the mixtapes are. But I'm like, I wonder if we're having the same conversation about Andre if Andre gave us 12 bodies of work, or if we're like. And I'm not saying that we wouldn't, because I think Andre is incredible, like he's transcendent. But it's like you're incredible and transcendent. But like I'm one of the people that's like, if Andre released the album today, that's the next thing that's going to be in my ears. But yeah, I don't know. Mm-hmm. What do you? I mean, and what do you think about like maybe even that scope? Because I think that's always an interesting thing. Like when it comes to people that. Like even enjoy hip hop, you know what I'm saying? Not even necessarily be like love hip hop, but people that even like enjoy hip hop, because it's like, because to be clear, there are some people that's like, oh yeah, hip hop is cool, but like, you know what I'm saying? Put on that Taylor Swift, which I let her rock for right now. She know what she did. But yeah, so like, what are you thinking about that? Like, just not even just in Andre and Wayne, but just in the context of production. Like, how much does production matter to your status as like a great artist or rapper?
I think it matters a lot, and I think in part because people think of production, they think of like sound. It's not sound; it's composition.
Yeah,
I think Wayne is a I think Wayne is a better rapper, but I think Dre is a better composer. And I say it like that to say it like this. I think if I were to ask like any rapper to write some things that would get somebody going, like a sure enough show five starter for anything, I can go to Wayne, at least vintage Wayne. Um, and like there is something that can kind of like cut and cover like all bases of what you think of hip hop. Like you can think of every trope, you can think of every like type of thing. Wayne got something in his catalog for it. But if
Yeah,
you ask for the different types of sounds, as well as the different types of approaches for it, and the most innovative ways for it, I don't know if I see the same range, or maybe not same range, but same interest in like that type of makeup or artistry. I don't know. Like I don't like. I'm not the type of person to end up saying like, "Oh, Andre is an artist. Wayne is more of a career rapper," and it's like, girl, they both out
mm,
here like doing their things. Um,
nah, yeah,
interest wise, I think Andre was like trying to, or has been like working a bit more in like some of the things that you mentioned, like being transcendent, being maybe surreal, being um a little bit longer to process, a little bit like further to kind of sit with. And that ain't like
yeah,
me being facetious in the way that folks say, like, oh, you got to be this smart to understand these bars. No, you just need to read and
yeah,
sit sometimes. Um,
but
but
yeah,
I, I, I think, I think I'd have to agree with you. I feel like Wayne might be like a little bit better rapper, and I only say that because I ain't got nobody else I can like put against him right now that I feel like I completely feel like they'll come out on top with. But I also know that I
Ooh,
kind of treat Andre like a mythical Pokemon, so like I would never like sing
yeah,
him out
yeah.
against other people like that.
Now listen, somebody that you do got to read a book. I don't want to say that for everything, but
Huh.
Lupe,
Hmm.
he's the murals was one where I was like, after I think, what is no, I can't remember the album after murals, but it's whatever album, Sun God Sam and the California Drug Deals.
Okay.
That song,
Okay.
it I think it's like factory reset my brain after I listen to it. It's but also I think he's also not like just what you're saying when it comes to like sounds, when it comes like to engineering the way that you're listening to the songs. I also think
Yeah.
that Wayne, as great of a rapper that he is, I don't think that he's changing how you're listening to a song. I think Andre's changing how I listen to a verse. Like I'm like
Yeah.
I don't know what to expect. I know Wayne's gonna rap something crazy and he's gonna say something that's gonna make you like, man, why? Who in the world? Nobody would say that. I can't imagine anybody saying that. But Andre's gonna make me really reformat how I'm listening to a verse. Lupe is gonna make me have to pull a book out and be like, okay, so what were we talking about here, Lupe? And it's good. It's good to be clear. It's amazing, but
I appreciate that at least about Lupe, and I think in part, like, what I've enjoyed about Lupe outside of his engineering has also been like the dedication to like his own flow. Like, you know
yeah,
Lupe when you hear him. Like,
yeah,
you know Lupe when you hear him. Like whether he even started with like kick push, which is the entry for most people, probably.
yeah.
Um, especially if you were like an OG Tumblr girl. Uh, but hmm, I like that. Like, I like the way you kind of said that. Like, folks that are like thinking about like how do we like be well in the genre while also like possibly expanding ways that we think about the genre
Yeah.
or experience it. Hmm.
Yeah, everybody says Lupe Fiasco is a surprisingly incredibly gangster individual, which is hilarious. Just his the way that he came. I think his the debut album, which I still am the character dynamics. I don't like when the Cool came out. Like, were you a Lupe fan when the Cool came out?
I was not. I was not, and
No.
like
Okay.
in part because I was on a real like Southern kick. Like I
Okay.
was back and forth with um some folks like from the earlier parts of the 2000s, and then like for some reason I was in a Pastor Troy bag for a long time. You can judge me. I do
Uh,
not care.
nah, I don't judge you. Nah, nah.
um, but like I was in a Pastor Troy bag for a long time. I was like listening to a lot of other folks, and I think I was like trying to like figure out what to do with my relationship with a couple different like artists at the time that was just like, I like your work, but I don't know if I like your like personality like projected on top of
Mhm.
your work no more. So I'm trying to
Yeah.
figure that out. By the time Lupe came out, I was like, this is new. This is interesting. I think at the time I just didn't have a bandwidth to like kind of sit with it.
That's real. Nah, it. Lupe's work definitely requires that too. The Cool, I still personally think is his best album,
Okay.
but the it's because of the character archetypes that he established in the Cool, and I really thought that those they were going to like what was it, like the streets,
Mm,
the game, and there was something else. There was one more because it was like a trinity of them. It was like the streets, the game, and like something else. But and the Put You On Game song,
mm.
there was like, I mean, that entire dynamics is like he knows how to tell a story. But there was this video game that was on, it was a computer game on the Cool website,
Yeah.
and it kind of introduced you to each of the characters, and you got to play as each of the characters. And when I tell you that, like, at that time I was like, I really need the Cool to be, it's like, oh, I would watch that movie, I would watch that show, you know what I mean?
I like that part of like the interesting bits of like that project from Lupe. Like
Yeah.
his his characterizations kind of like remind me in part of how I like been like recently treating my the speakers in my poems, I guess. Like which one of
Yeah.
y'all is like the one that's loud? Which one of y'all is like the one that like will say the thing and then like run?
Yeah.
But
And then also,
yeah.
I mean, even when we were talking about before, like how you think about your work and you're not necessarily thinking about one at a time, you're thinking about everything at once. And I think about stuff like that album rollout
Mm,
where it could easily be a book as much as it is
yeah.
an album. You know what I mean? He could easily be a play as much as it is an album, because he's speaking and he's not always Lupe Fiasco. I think the only song where he's like Lupe Fiasco is like Superstar,
Yeah.
which I controversial. I hate that song. I don't know, it's like this really
I
happy kind of kicky up song in the midst of all these like dark, really deeply introspective, like, are you part of the game, are you this hustler? Oh, the hustler. So it's the hustler, it was the
yeah.
game, the streets, and the hustler. So it's like all these dynamics, like that toy soldier song. Oh my god, that was and like it just seemed like this, really, it seemed like the single, like it was the single, by the
Mm,
way, right? So it's like this single that way you can get people drawn in, but then I'm like, that's not what you're getting with this album. Like, you're not getting that with the album, which it's, I mean, I guess it's kind of part of, that's like the music industry thing, because I
mm,
think even later on he said like that wasn't a song that he really rocked with, but he kind of had to do it because of the label
I
requirements,
mean,
which is just to say, yeah, what you were saying before, like this idea that he had this like multi-level rollout, because the way that he's thinking about these characters, like he's not just thinking about them as a rap, you know what I mean? Like these
yeah.
characters don't, they, an incarnation of them is probably in the rap, right? But then another
Yeah.
incarnation is this like this visual manifestation that's in this video game. He helped design the game. So it's like this visual manifestation of this character that lives in this rap and things like that. So I mean, I like when I
Yeah.
was like thinking about Lupe, I was just like thinking about like how you were just talking about how these things are existing at once. Like this kind of a cool kind of synergy.
Yeah. I think poetically, at least, Lupe kind of like It's like all the makings of like a really, really, a really, really like self in tune, like poet. Like he knows his
Mm,
processes as well as like his understandings of like how he uses persona. Like
yeah.
I think if I've taken anything from like Lupe and folks like him, it's probably been like if you gonna say you're going to do a thing in a poem, do it. Like I can't remember which one of you said like it was showing like character through action or something through action, but I'm like honestly that's like the way that I've been at least attempting to tell my students like we don't need you to contextualize your entire poem in like a paragraph if your poem is only like 3 lines, as much as we need your 3 lines to be the strongest set of 3 lines that they can be given your like resources and energy. It breaks some hearts from time to time, I guess, but like I don't know, it kind of like make that type of conversation, that type of thing makes me think of like some of the stuff that just kind of like took my poetry, I guess, to whatever the next level I thought was the next level for me was, which was like what are the folks that are professional like doing? What are they talking about? How can I possibly mimic that? Or like, do I care to have interest in those types of things? I was at a writing retreat uh, with Jericho Brown, and I remember him asking me and my cohort members like, "What does the Uber version of you sound like? What does the like biggest or brightest or like hyper version of you sound like?" And I think like I started to take that type of attitude to my poetry of like when I am like at my most powerful, who am I in my poems? Especially if I've been like my like most vulnerable in my poems. Can those two people or those types of speakers exist in the same space? Is that one entity? Is that multiple? I'm not necessarily trying to name them or number them because I might get to 101 Dalmatians. Given all any circumstances, especially post pandemic, conversations between the poet in me, the writer in me, the teacher in me, and the other person that's really trying to get a nap. Like my morning conversations in my head and meditations feel like team meetings, and one of the girls is always late with coffee, and I don't drink coffee, so we're screwed. But given the circumstances, I like bringing some of that chaos to my poems and like seeing kind of like what happens. I love the fact that like other artists kind of do like stuff like that, and I think I've been kind of like pulling from a lot of hip hop artists to kind of be like, hmm, can I be bold? Can I like say that thing and like get away with it? Can I do this? Can I do that? And like, what do I want to say? What have I not said? What can I incorporate with things that I do enjoy? Like weird stuff like I love apples, but I've never written a poem about apples. Can I write an angry apple poem? Can I write an angry orchard poem? Is this about ale? Is this about like a bad night like at like a craft bar? Like what's the
Tim
circumstances?
Cook
We
is
don't
just
know.
gonna come knocking at your door, and it's gonna be like, "What did you say?"
You
Um,
know?
I'll shut your phone off right now.
Like I might have a really bad job, like bad dream about vinegar attacking me because I was talking about apples being crazy. But given circumstances, I don't know. Like I think a lot of those artists, like that we mentioned, bring like that type of energy that I'm really interested in poetry about.
Yeah. I think one of the things that really appeals me to just art in general is the removal of the preface, right? Just like you were saying, I think that a lot of artists they feel comforted, or they feel more comfort in being like, this is me talking about the bad guy, or
Yeah.
this is what the bad guy would say. But like,
Mm-hmm.
no, 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 no. Like, I want to hear from the bad guy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want you, because it's like it makes them feel a little bit safer. Like, listen, girl, this isn't me saying this. This is this
Mm-hmm.
guy saying this. Like, no, 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 no. That's the interesting guy, though. Like, regardless of what your feelings are about that entity or the person or whoever it is, because even when we're talking about like just power, like powerful, like even when you're talking about like who is like when you feel the most powerful, it's like maybe there's a maniacal nature to the powerful person that you're embodying at the time. And I'm
Mhm.
like, man, what does that look like? What is that dynamic? And I don't want to know what that dynamic is from a third person. Like, I want to know
Yeah.
what that dynamic is from that person.
Yeah.
And I think there's so many writers that are just kind of afraid to go into that territory, whether it be because then they'll feel like they are that person and they want
Yeah.
the plausible deniability, or maybe they'll feel like I'll never come back. And like, what if you never come back? Like, what if what if now what if now you're evil?
I think
And what does that do to the world?
I kind of played with that premise in my book a lot. Like, I've been thinking about that. Like, what happens if you give up the ghost? What happens if you end up saying, like, okay, I'm not going to be good, likable. I'm not going to be pleasant. I'm not going to be agreeable. What happens if I still then decide to, like, do my work with that type of persona or attitude attached to it? It's weird because it gets, like, uncomfortable. A little bit of, like, the stuff that I read about is like social relationships and whatnot, and so, like, being able to
Mm,
talk about relationships in the ways in which things go noticed but unsaid,
yeah.
and, like, bringing some of those, like, disturbances up a little bit to kind of make you think about how you've, like, interacted with folks, make you wonder, like, did you say that and mean it? Did you say that and it was misconstrued? Did you say that and, like, you didn't know what it meant? And, like, what happens, like, when you have a speaker that is, like, willing to, like, navigate all of that and say, like, hey, I heard what you said, I remember what you said, this is what I'm going to do about it, and this is what I'm not going to tell you I'm going to do about it.
Yeah. That's the man. Okay. I think me and Jeff were talking about this before. Like, me and Jeff, like, I think talk about like movies a lot, but like one of the things that we were talking about fairly recently is I think a lot of people don't understand what the protagonist is in your story, because
Mm,
a lot of people view the protagonist as the good, like they like you're the good guy, because a
mm,
lot of people view themselves as the good guy. And I'm like, because they view themselves as the good guy, they're like, I am, then in order for me to be the protagonist, then I have to be a good guy, and I have to, like, the story has to be moving through my actions, where I'm
mm,
like, the protagonist, like, you don't need to be the good guy. It's just
mm.
like the story has to be developing through your actions.
Yeah.
Like you know what I mean, like your actions are the ones that are pushing the story. And I'm like, those are the characters that I want to see in the poems. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to see that. I don't want to say, okay, well, if somebody's like personal poem where they're like, hey, let me tell you about this trauma, I'm not over here like, but let me tell let me hear from his side of the story. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna do that in the middle of somebody's critiquing somebody's poem. Like, yeah, they did that, but did what happened? What was
Yeah.
there? What were they thinking? Although, let me not get into that. But it's just to say that I think once you release yourself from the thought that a protagonist is has to be good, I
Yeah.
think you make a much vaster kind of runway for yourself, because now you can explore what it's like to be a protagonist and be a person that is heavily flawed, that is in relationships. Like, you might be the worst person in the relationship, but
Mhm.
your actions are the driving force in the things and dynamics that you're describing in your poem. And I think, as I mean, and this is why I really love talking to people that are, like, they're also like visual people like you know what I'm saying? Because I think that as somebody who, I think most of the work that I do is either on one end of the spectrum, or that, like, I either do like short film photography or like poems. And so,
Mhm.
like, trying to bring those like narrative bases to the forefront, and those, like, they kind of work in concert with each other. And
Yeah.
so, just like where you're talking about how, like, they're all kind of working together at once, but then you saw, it's like, how do I create a dynamic where I am not being just the good guy, but I'm able to flow into these spaces where maybe I'm the bad guy, but I'm the main guy. Like, I'm the guy that's speaking.
I
So
mean, it's such a
now what?
beautiful space to kind of think about, like, the gray areas of that. Like, what happens if I'm not good? What happens if I'm not bad and I just am? What happens if I
Yeah.
sit with my regret as well as my joy, and then decide to write about it and let you know that I write about it?
Yeah.
From there, I don't know.
Did you watch?
We're gonna
I'm sorry,
get some new stuff. Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, no. Did you watch Breaking Bad?
I do not, but I've seen enough episodes to get the general premise of it.
What about Snowfall?
Little bit, little bit.
A little bit. Dang.
I've seen
Okay.
more Breaking Bad than I've seen Snowfall.
I'll say more. Okay, so I feel like one of the things that I was talking to Ajane about it. I'm like in a conventional television show 30 years ago,
Mm,
like Hank Schrader, like the police officer, he would have been
yeah,
he would have been the protagonist, right?
definitely.
Because he would have been the person that I mean, they probably would have changed some things about him because like he's like a
Yeah,
little
but
bit racist in this show.
he would have. He more than likely would have been the central figure of it
Yeah,
because one, he's relatable. Two, it's a archetype that you think you've already heard, and like
yeah,
then it feels like you have reason to be suspicious of Walter White.
yeah.
Like
But
now you
it's
have like all of these things of like, what's this man doing? Why is this kid over
yeah,
here? What's going on? Why does he have money? Why does he like do all of these
yeah.
things?
But I think it's such a good thing. And again, when we're talking about interesting aspects of writing and interesting things that you can do with your writing that de- help your audience develop a new taste for what they're reading or watching or intaking, because I think in watching Walter White essentially become Heisenberg, you're
Yeah.
also like, I am watching the villain. I'm not watching the hero become a hero. I'm watching the villain become the villain,
Mm-hmm.
and that is it's interesting because people don't really do it that much. Like maybe they'll do it. They'll have one movie where he's a villain, and the next incarnation of the second movie, you might have like a movie where you're looking back and he's like the whatever, he's the
Mm-hmm.
villain, or he's like the good guy who becomes a villain. When really, like,
Yeah.
Walter White is it he is a villain even at the beginning. Like, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, it's which is interesting to think about.
I,
But
I
yeah,
think like most folks kind of think of Walter White as like a person capable of doing bad because he is a chemist and that can do drugs. Like we know in part uh that there is like range and depth to like his person as well as his character. We also know what happens like throughout the space of like his journey with it. But
yeah,
like kind of given that, I don't know, it makes me think of like what happens when we perhaps like put ourselves in work or think of like characters like origins that are not like the protagonist or the antagonist. Maybe
yeah,
what happens like if we get like an anti-hero that's kind of born. Are they good? Are they bad? Like how do they operate? How do they negotiate and navigate their personal morals and ethics? Stuff like that.
yeah.
But y'all
Yeah.
know I can talk clearly.
Yeah, so yeah, yeah. I'm not gonna like go more on Breaking Bad. Like, but if you ever like, you should watch. I feel like Breaking Bad from beginning to end.
Mm.
I feel like we should have some conversations about it. I feel like you would.
I'm willing to give it a
It's
shot. I went through all the Game of Thrones after being like very starkly against it for a very long time, and I watched it all in a month.
and I'm sorry for how that ended. I
I
really
watched it
I
all in a month to then wait 2 years to then get to that point, and like while I could say things and won't, um,
no, I know.
in my heart of hearts, I there are things that like will possibly get said on either Twitter or somewhere else, but like a story we wanted so much for.
Oh my! There's so much stuff that's like, did you just forget? Like, did you forget this was a thing? Like, as somebody who's like, I know what foreshadowing is.
Yep.
So when you even Aya Aya was not supposed to be what Aya ended up being. And the reason why they did this is they did to subvert. We want to subvert your expectations. You know, you're expecting this thing, so we're going to do this thing. But I'm like, the thing that you're doing is you're being disloyal to the entire thing that you just did. You just went through 7 seasons of this buildup, and because you were like, we don't want to do the expected, you just betrayed.
It happens. It happens, and like, what's I think like unfortunate about it is that like it's like the conversations sometimes stop after like that type of thing happens. When it like kind of happens often, like it's hard as crap to like think of like a project that like you're sitting with for like 7 years, like even if the source material exists.
That's right.
And you're sitting with like, how do I make this thing? How can I keep it going? I do have like possible thoughts about like the showrunners, and like a lot of the fandom is not necessarily pleased with them, but
yeah,
I don't know, it's tough to think about a project that possibly isn't completely finished that you're trying to beat, while also thinking about like, can I betray myself? Will it like hurt if I betray myself in this moment? These are usually my conversations about poems, and like whether or not I feel like making the first line of my poem the title.
No, okay. So there's a couple podcasts ago we were talking about like poem structure and how I think like Jeff made a clip out of it, but it was just like, you know, where you'll have like these 4 line stanzas in your poem the entire way, and then you like end it with like a couplet. And like in my head, I'm like, man, you should never do that. And then also like in my Google Docs right now, I'm like, let me jump in there and figure some stuff out.
There's tension, and Jeff is a trendsetter because now I got to like end a poem in a couplet now because I got one that's in all quatrains. That's in my drafts right now.
I mean, it's all based on context, right? Like the big thing is, well, I'm sure you can speak to this too, is that a lot of poets, what we see happen is you get to the close of your poem. You're finally reaching that moment where you actually realize what your poem's actually about. And instead of continuing your investigation, you're like, all right, case closed. I'm just going to, I'm booking out of here. Like we did the thing. We're out. You know, and there's so many, that specific clip was talking about ways you can kind of identify that happening, and typical ways you could do that are if you have a style going on, like if you have, let's say you have a 5 stanza poem, stanza 1, 2, 3, 4 are doing something, and then stanza 5 is going to do something completely different. Like even abstract. Now we're going to do hardcore concrete image, or we're going to do lyric narrative, or we're going to do, you know, whatever. Just those sorts of shifts are always kind of like, I'm not saying like trash the poem, I'm saying your poem has just begun.
Yeah, they make it interesting. They like kind of give you like some things to play with. Like I have like so many weird poems that I think like once I start like kind of putting them in lines, I'm like, okay, we got tercet, quatrain. Why end with a quatrain? Tension. Sometimes you just want to leave things a little. Yeah.
I was there. So had to get it done.
I don't know though. I'm always like really like enjoying things like that. Like if you got a 7-page poem that's like nothing but quatrains and even in a couplet, I'm gonna say like that's badass. Do it again. I want to see it done again.
Jeff will never endorse a 7-page poem.
No, I wouldn't.
Jeff will never endorse a 7-page poem.
It's intentionality.
Yeah,
it's intentional. Like, how much of this is because you've taken the time to actually make the conscious decision of, okay, this is the reason this is appearing on the page the way it is because I have taken the moment, I played with it, I have gone through different variations, and this is the one that I think captures what I'm going after. Cool, we can have that argument, but I don't know if everyone's having those sorts of discussions with their work.
I think in part we kind of got to be generous about like what people are thinking about with their work. some folks are like having questions like, can I make money off my poem? And that's like the full and only conversation that they're having about their work. Some folks are like, can I get through this poem without crying? And like however they decide, then, to me at least, to like kind of play some of those things out like in design and like content, I'm always like curious about who does it best. Like, I want to know who makes grief sound sexy to the point where I can like think about, you know, folks that are like doing things that are like causing me to experience poems maybe differently, or maybe engage them differently. Also, Jeff, now I got to see this poem that's like in tercets or in quatrains that ends in a couplet, because I'm really with like lines of like even numbers for some reason. I don't know. I find them cool.
That my it's something about just it being halved and you being like, I have the same amount on each side. Like something about it brings some symmetry to my brain.
It can be hard to fight against the neatness.
That part. I feel like I'm always like trying to like make my poems tidy, and they're just like, we don't like this. We want to like burst out of this.
It's hard.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of that's just like education and things like that, but I think it's really hard to break. I like also what you mentioned too about just talking to because one of the things that when I'm like, if I'm workshopping a poem with someone, that's actually one of the first things I've gone for now is I try to figure out what is the actual goal.
Yeah.
Like, are we publishing? You know, if we're aiming for like a tier 1 journal, that's a very different mindset that we have to approach a poem with. Whereas like if we're like, hey, I want to write this like love poem for someone, or I just so I think trying to get the goal down has been something I've really tried to shift with.
It's real. Like, I wish I could sometimes ask my poems what they're doing. They don't like to speak early often, and the ones that do are just kind of like, we have lots of things to say. You won't understand it yet, so like go sit down and take a nap. Come back to it a week later. You'll figure it out. Just to say, my poems are difficult often, mostly just because they're stubborn, which is probably saying everything about me. So, yeah,
that's my. I don't know if you can speak to my first drafts are usually very solid first drafts, but the problem is they just take forever. They're solid because they just take in if something is fighting back, that's usually I'm just like, all right, well, I'll spend my my 15 minutes, my 20 minutes to sit with it. If nothing comes, we'll just try again tomorrow. So you end up with a first draft that just kind of drags and drags and drags.
Yeah, I have a draft like that right now. It's about like 3 weeks old, and it won't move. It's like, nope, don't talk to me. I'm not telling you what this means yet. Don't look at me. Like, don't ask me no questions. I won't speak. I said what I said, and you will sit with it.
I feel that. And I think the key is just not getting frustrated. It's like, all right, it's
true.
Just you show up. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, We'll try again.
I think that's the part like
try again.
That's the part like the teaching yourself like how to deal with yourself in workshop, which like I don't know. I've been trying not to trigger myself while I'm like editing poems and revising things lately. It's tough. But I do feel like if I end up like hitting an emotion, I'm like in the right like direction. I'm like, ooh, why does this make me like annoyed? Why does this make me sad? What's happening?
Emotion is the big unlock. Like, because if you're, I mean, it goes back to the quote, people aren't going to remember what you wrote, but they are going to remember how you made them feel. And I think it's the same thing with a poem. You come back to that poem that's like, you remember that poem that you read 10 years ago. You don't remember the words from it, but you remember how it made you feel. You remember that, I really like that poem. I remember it was really good, made me feel really good or whatever, or had a killer line that made me think of this thing or whatever. You remember that.
Most of it's I think like that's the thing I still like believe in poetry about. Like, every now and then I come across a poem. I'm like, where have you been all my life, poem?
That's such a good feeling. Guys, it's late. We did some talking.
We did do some.
Really, I did have one final question for you,
Sure.
which was I have to remember because it was a while ago. Our discussion's gone many different. I wasn't expecting to talk about wrestling. I'll put it that way.
I wasn't either, but like it's been a good time. Like y'all got
I'm
me
here
to like
for
say
it.
with a steel chair.
That's just gonna be like the title of this like YouTube video, like with the steel chair, like this.
Yes.
I did some stuff in this.
Yes.
So I'm going to cap this response at a maximum of 5 minutes, just because again time. So one of the things you mentioned about teaching, and you also mentioned you're doing business.
Yeah.
And these are such different experiences because when you're doing business, when you have a client comes to you, they want something.
Yeah.
They have it in their mind. They're paying you because they have a vision in their head, or they have an idea at least. Maybe you have the vision that they turn to, but they have an end product that they are looking for. Students have course requirements. They have to do these intro classes and things like that. Do you feel like long term this is going to cause any sort of like tension for you? Is this something that's going to take you out of academia? This fact that you're dealing with students that have different goals, that are coming to you for different motives than people in business who are coming to you with an actual motivation?
Not really. No more than it already has. And I guess I mean to say it as it doesn't necessarily feel like different types of thinking as much as it is like adjustment for like the type of person that I'm trying to serve. Like most of my website clients are not like my like branding clients. Most of my website clients are like, hey, I need a website. I don't know how to do this at all. Can you like take my information and put it into something like really cool that can get me some like online attention and keep my things housed like internet wise? Sure. Often because people feel out of their depth. For logo and branding clients, sometimes it gets to be a little bit more difficult because people have an understanding of what they think like the work that I do is. Like they know what a logo is or what they think it's supposed to do, but they might not know what I do with them, or like might not know what I do with like the patterns or the symbols and the color systems that I make to make a visual system appealing for whatever your idea is. Some folks think like, oh, I just needed a logo. That's not entirely what I do. It is a part of it, but some elements of it are more specific to kind of help you finish promoting your business, kind of get yourself out there, etc. For my students, I think I set my expectations differently so that way they can help inform me of what they need. Like my spring semester, I taught an advanced poetry workshop, and a lot of my students, I spent so much of the semester trying to like, encourage different types of poetry, encourage different types of conversation and style, all for me to find out towards the end of the semester that they had never gone to a poetry reading. And so then my conversation has to shift because I'm like, you might not even have context for what I mean. For some of them, that was the first time they'd read a poem in front of other people or anything that they've written in front of other people. And so sometimes the difficulty is less about, can I make you feel like you're getting what you need, as opposed to what can I serve you with today that you also have to like contribute towards. Like I think for my students in part, like the biggest difference of like the work is that it's a two-way street. I can bring you the lesson, I can bring you the material, I can bring you the advice. I can't make you write. I can't make you edit. I can't make you think differently. I can encourage you to. But oftentimes my work is less of like a product. You're not necessarily here to write poems as much as you are here to understand how this genre might work. your understanding of like how to be engaged with it critically, how to allow it to be incorporated into your space. And maybe, just maybe, if we're lucky, you write something. I think for me at least, the biggest thing about academia that I'm kind of worried about is like being able to like keep two nearly completely different industries like together in the way that I guess I do. It's hard to work language from a graphic designer standpoint in ways that folks might not understand if you don't understand how I process words. Oftentimes, I know my poems will say a lot of things. There'll be a lot of language. I can't make you digest the language easier, but I can make it more appealing to you. That way you can think that it's easier for you to understand. I can't necessarily like teach you how to write a an ode unless I can help show you what it is that you care about that deeply to want to write an ode about something. I can't necessarily tell you how to write a sonnet as much as I can show you what people believe are sonnets, what we have classically understood as such, and what do you feel like you can contribute towards with this form like that. If you think a sonnet is a love poem, you have written your sonnet. If you think a every poem is a love poem, you have written your love poem. But what I can't necessarily do is like you come here and say, "Hi, I want to write a chapbook in a semester." I'm going to ask you, are you prepared to work to get a chapbook in a semester? Because if you're going to sit with 20 to 21 pages or whatever the number is that you want, are you willing to have the energy to and the capacity to do this? Because then this is not my problem. I can be your accountability partner, but I can't do anything else. The same thing happens with, in part, like teaching curriculum. I can't make you understand everything. There's a chance that I'm not going to be able to. That is neither one of our jobs. Your job is to be able to try to come here to attempt to learn. My job is to be able to introduce you to content, potentially give you resources, and possibly ways to succeed. At best, it is a beautiful reciprocal exchange. At worst, it is me giving you cheat codes.
We love your
From there, like what you do with your cheat codes in school will in part like kind of determine what you do with like those things. I can't make you an artist, but I can encourage you to make art. And I'm always going to encourage you to make art. As far as like me making you art, we might have some discussions, but I don't know. I think my students probably like are the best types of clients because they have way less expectations but way more hopes. And some of the hopes are just like, I don't know how to write a poem, but I'm inspired and I'm gonna take that today and I'm gonna try something. I'm like, all right, cool. Then they come back and they're like, I tried something. I'm like, great. Now we're working with everything that we need. Cooking with grease now. I just hope you don't burn yourself, and if you intend on frying fish, do not burn the tail. Um, Me and my country, bits of anecdotes for poem writing, but this is also me a tiny bit sleepy.
Cool. On that note, Willie, congratulations on the book, the prize, the job, the just life. Congratulations on life, Willie. You're doing the thing, man.
I'm trying. That feels really great. Thank you. I really needed to hear that.
Cool. Willie, we're gonna let you go. Besides, I'm gonna close us out.
Oh, thank you.
We'll be in touch, man. Good to hear from you. You be good, okay?
Y'all too. Have a good one.
All right. Hey, take care, man. Bye. All right, guys. You all have a good day. Have a good night. Good afternoon. We will see you next time on the rest of Live.
Okay.